August 23rd, 2018. It's a warm summer night in Marietta, Georgia, one of Atlanta's oldest and most charming suburbs, steeped in centuries of history and culture.
Marietta is a picturesque, southern, small-town, comfortable community in Atlanta.
Just good schools, nice area to raise a family.
But being so close to the big city, Marietta residents also deal with their fair share of crime.
It's a very busy urban area, lots of people passing through, lots of traffic, high crime.
And tonight is no exception.
On August 23rd of 2018 at around 3:03 in the morning, officers got a 911 phone call.
Now this is a kind of cryptic call.
911, what is your emergency?
Yeah, I need some squad. I need
He's saying that he wants the police to do a welfare check on Ziana Graham.
Ziana Graham was a local resident, a mother of 4. The 911 caller was saying she hadn't been answering any of his phone calls.
What do you need us to do for you?
I need you to come and evaluate the situation.
He didn't want to give his name, but he was definitely concerned.
He requested that officers go out to her address.
The police are concerned. Why do they need to go over there?
Oh, I need to know what I'm sending my officers into.
Oh, don't worry about it, then.
So what's going on there?
Given the suspicious nature of the call, the operator immediately dispatches officers to Ziana's home.
911 dispatch hurriedly sends police to that location because they want to know what's going on.
Ziana might have been hurt.
When you're dispatched to a welfare check, you don't know what to expect.
24-year-old Ziana Graham had a heart that overflowed with love for the people in her life.
She had a very bubbly personality.
If she was your friend, she loved you deep.
Growing up in the northern reaches of the Bay Area, Ziana was a bright student who connected with people everywhere she went.
Ziana, she grew up on the West Coast in Vallejo, which is near Sacramento.
At a very young age, Ziana was a friendly person. She wanted to make friends with everybody that she met.
But when trouble reared its head at home, Ziana's strong spirit was put to the test.
I had a troubled marriage with her mother in the beginning of Ziana's life.
Their parents separated early on.
Instead of healing, time only brought more problems for the Graham family.
Her father was deployed shortly after 9/11, and upon return came back with issues around drug and alcohol abuse.
I began using drugs and drinking quite a bit.
Eventually, Ziana's mother was granted full custody, and her father sort of drifted out of her life.
I loved Ziana very much, but it's like the more it didn't work out for me, the more I turned to alcohol.
And Ziana wasn't far behind.
About the age of 12 or 13, she started using drugs, started hanging out with a bad crowd.
I take my part of the blame, unfortunately, but all she really wanted to do was be accepted.
Kind of got out of hand, and her mom couldn't handle it.
In an effort to help Ziana turn her life around, her family decided to make some big changes.
The only option was to turn her over to the grandma.
So they then migrated to Marietta, Georgia.
They went trying to get Ziana reestablished and put into school.
But life proved to be just as difficult in Georgia as it was in California.
She was doing really well. She had started going to school. She had stopped using drugs. But at the age of 15, she got pregnant.
Ziana decided to marry the father of her child and start a family.
There's nowhere else I want to be.
As a young mom, Ziana found what had been missing from her life.
She was so happy to be a mom. She knew this is what she wanted to do with her life.
She had her second child, and things seemed like they were going well for the two.
But after 4 years, Ziana's marriage crumbled.
Being young and then taking on additional responsibility of your children and then newly being married doesn't play well into the future.
They ended up getting divorced, and now Ziana is left with her 2 children.
That marked the beginning of a long string of failed relationships.
She was dating, but it wasn't going anywhere.
Ziana at 19 has a 3rd kid, and she and her 3rd child's father never created or maintained a relationship. And then she has another child by another person.
So by the time she's 24, she has 4 children.
As a single mom with 4 kids, life could be difficult.
Life was very stressful for her.
She's wondering, where do I turn for some relief?
Just as she was on the verge of hitting her breaking point, Ziana met someone new.
In the wake of all of that, she meets Chris Scarborough.
They actually met during Ziana's first day at her new job.
You gotta get it up here against the wall. No paint, no paint drip.
Ziana worked for Christopher, helping him paint.
I'll be a pro in no time, thanks to you.
Chris is from Raleigh, North Carolina, and had been living with his mother in Ackworth, which is maybe 20 minutes away.
Ziana and him hit it off.
He's a tall, dark, handsome man. He's older, more mature, and all of those things were appealing to Ziana.
Before long, their friendship blossomed into something more.
Their work relationship transitions to a more loving relationship.
Chris felt as if he wanted to be a part of not only Ziana's life, but now her 4 kids' life.
They're gonna love you. I already know.
Ziana knew she'd finally found what she was looking for.
She was just excited about what the relationship was going to bring.
But now, Marietta police are racing to Ziana's home after receiving a cryptic 911 call from an unknown source.
An anonymous call comes into 911 referencing a welfare check needing to be done at the residence.
When the police arrive, they knock on the door, and Ziana's grandmother answers.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. We're here to check on Ziana Graham. Is she here?
The grandmother was confused. She says Ziana is fine. She's asleep in her room.
Officers think it may be a prank call.
And we're sorry to bother you this late. Have a nice night.
Good night.
But as the police drive away, Ziana's grandmother gets a bad feeling.
She decides that she's gonna go check on Ziana.
Nothing could have prepared her for what she saw.
Oh, God. She found her granddaughter deceased on the ground.
Ziana!
After overcoming her rocky childhood, 24-year-old Ziana Graham found purpose and joy as the mother to 4 beautiful children.
She loved being a mom. That's what she cared about most.
She was very passionate about her children.
But that didn't mean it was easy.
She's struggling to work, provide for her children.
She really could use a hand in raising this family that she has created.
So, when she met a kind-hearted construction worker named Christopher Scarborough, it seemed like a match made in heaven.
Ziana is excited because Christopher is everything that she wanted. He was a provider, he was loving.
She loved that he was secure, he was working, he had a steady job.
She's ready to take care of her and her children.
She was hoping that this might be the one.
But now an anonymous 911 call has led Ziana's grandmother to make a horrifying discovery.
Oh, God!
When the police arrived, she turned them away initially because she didn't expect anything. But then that's when she went and discovered her granddaughter dead.
Ziana! She then called 911 back, explaining that her granddaughter was deceased.
Marietta police quickly returned to the residence, followed by homicide detectives.
Ziana's grandmother and her children were obviously very upset. So detectives arranged for them to be transported back to the station while they looked through the house.
When you first arrive at the scene, you're going to take a look at the body. You're going to determine if there's any injuries.
Ziana is laying on her back. Her hands are spread beside her body. Her neck looks like it's broken. And she has broken small red blood vessels in her eyes.
It's a clear sign that Ziana's death was no accident.
Petechiae in the eye is a very clear indication of strangulation.
The big question was, who did this to her?
Hoping for a clue to her killer, officers set out to search the home.
They were going through it with a fine-tooth comb.
They're looking for, are there any signs of forced entry?
Are there weapons? Is there blood spatter? What in here is going to point us towards a suspect?
While they don't turn up any hard evidence, the investigators are able to eliminate at least one theory.
There was no signs of theft or any indication that someone wanted to break into the home.
By all indications, this wasn't a random attack. This was targeted.
But who would want to kill a doting mother like Ziana?
Police start recalling back to this very curious anonymous tip for a welfare check. They didn't want to give any identifying information.
Could the man who called 911 also be the monster who took Ziana's life?
Thank you, sir. There you go.
So they requested a trace on that mysterious 911 call to try to figure out who that was that called in for this welfare check.
While they wait for the results, detectives head to the station to speak to Ziana's family.
They want to talk to those who are in the house, including the children. But due to this traumatic experience, it may be hard to get them to say anything.
Instead, they focus their attention on Ziana's grandmother.
I know this is gonna be hard, but I gotta ask you a few questions.
Of course.
She's frantic and she's confused.
She's trying to make sense of all these crazy events that just happened in her own home.
Can you think of anyone that may have wanted to hurt Ziana?
No, I just can't understand it.
She doesn't know who could have done this to Ziana.
Her granddaughter who never met a stranger, who was everyone's friend, who always was pleasant, who always was full of life. Why would anybody want to do anything to her?
Was there anyone new in Ziana's life?
Not that I know of. Unless you mean Christopher?
She explained that she was dating a Christopher Scarborough.
She told them that he was a construction worker, helped around the house, and did little small, tighter things.
She felt that he was a great guy. He was nice to her, the children, and Ziana. There's probably something I should tell you. Even though grandmother thought Christopher was great, there's a concern.
She revealed that Christopher had just gotten out of jail.
After mother of four Ziana Graham was strangled to death in her home, Georgia investigators suspect the killer could be someone she knew.
They started thinking that maybe this is personal because there was no signs of theft or forced entry.
Now, detectives have just learned that Ziana's boyfriend of 7 months, Christopher Scarborough, was released from jail just 2 weeks before she was murdered.
Of course, the detectives were concerned because he has a criminal history.
Could that have been the person who did this?
What was Christopher's relationship with Ziana like?
Good, I think. He was there for her when she needed him.
Grandmother was trying to see the best in Chris as he was helping out around the house.
He was mowing the grass, he was making repairs in the home, just taking care of everything.
He seemed to bring a sense of stability, a sense of consistency to the family structure. He was really being like a man of the house kind of figure.
When's the last time you saw Christopher?
Last night, he came by to visit Ziana for a little bit.
She shared that Ziana's boyfriend, Christopher, stays with them from time to time, and he happened to be there last night.
However, he left, and that was normal because sometimes he would go to stay with his mother in Ackworth.
He's between two different households.
What was he like when he left?
Not sure. I didn't talk to him.
Grandma was already in bed at this point, but she heard him leave out the front door.
After detectives end their interview with Ziana's grandmother, they receive word that their trace of the 911 caller's cell phone has been completed.
The number that made the call turned out to be a prepaid phone without a real name attached to it.
They were able to get a GPS position for the device that made the 911 call, and the location rang a bell for the detectives.
The 911 call had come in from Ackworth.
Since Christopher has family in Ackworth, they thought maybe that's where Christopher was.
When they arrive at the GPS coordinates, their suspicions are confirmed.
They go to Ackworth, where they believe this is Christopher's mother's house. And guess what? He's there.
They let him know that they wanted to ask him questions about his girlfriend.
Initially, he was very upset. He had not heard from her, and he needed to know what was going on.
So what's he on there?
He stated that he was trying to contact her. She wasn't answering the phone, so he became worried about her.
When the investigators break the news that his girlfriend is dead, Christopher seems stunned.
Chris was genuinely shocked to find out that Ziana was gone.
They had this opportunity to ask him as many questions as they need because he is being so willing and cooperative.
How's your relationship with Miss Grant? Good?
He said he loves Ziana and her kids.
How long have you and her been seeing each other? 7 months. 7 months. Mm-hmm.
They fell deep and fast for each other.
But that doesn't mean they always got along.
Have you guys ever gotten into it with each other? I mean, everybody does, right? Sometimes.
He said, we fight, but that's normal. Most people fight in relationships.
And the night before Ziana was found dead was no exception.
He stated that very night they had gotten into an argument, and that was one of the reasons why he left.
Detectives asked, what were you arguing about?
No, you would act like this!
He stated that she was constantly picking a fight with him.
You just done? Okay. You said that argument got physical. Can you talk to me about that? Hitting me.
Get out!
But Christopher tells detectives he kept his cool.
He was thinking that it was probably in his best interest to just let her calm down and they'll have a conversation later on.
He figured he could just go to his mom's house.
So he called him a ride share and left to go back to Ackworth.
When he walked out the door, Christopher says Ziana was still alive.
How was Ziana when you left? Thomas, she was talking to you when you left. Okay.
He said she was upset, but she definitely wasn't dead.
Detectives aren't sure if they can believe him, especially since they suspect he made the anonymous 911 call that led them to Ziana's body.
If he didn't know Ziana was hurt, why would he have asked for a welfare check?
When they confront Christopher with their suspicions, he gives them an answer they weren't expecting.
They decided to ask him, and he admits to making the 911 call.
But not because he knew Ziana was dead.
Christopher said Ziana had relapsed.
He said she was out of control.
After he left, she stopped answering the phone.
He was concerned, and he needed to know what was going on.
He thought she might have overdosed.
Georgia construction worker Christopher Scarborough has admitted to fighting with his girlfriend, Ziana Graham, just a few hours before she was found dead in her home.
We was just arguing.
But he insists he didn't kill her.
When he left the house, he reported she was alive and well.
Christopher claims there was another reason why he asked police to perform a welfare check on his girlfriend that night.
According to him, Ziana had started using drugs again. He stated that she was out of her mind, going crazy.
Once he left the house, she wasn't taking his calls or answering his texts, so he thought she might have OD'd or something bad might have happened.
You wanted somebody to go check on her, make sure she was okay? Yeah.
He said he was trying to help.
He didn't want Ziana to find out he called the police on her, so that's why he said he refused to give his name to the 911 operator.
The information that Ziana had a drug problem comes as a surprise to detectives.
That opened a lot of new avenues for the investigation. Was this a drug deal that went bad? Has Ziana reached out to some unknown third party while she was under the influence?
The investigators are now thinking several different outcomes could have resulted in Ziana being strangled.
On top of that, Christopher's story appears to check out.
Chris, is your mother home?
Yeah.
Fuck!
The officers look into his alibi.
Police follow up with his mom, and she does confirm that he did stay with her the night before.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks. Have a good day.
Let's get his phone records and subpoena the rideshare company.
Right. They contact Uber, and they confirm that Christopher did leave Ziana's house that night.
The investigators thought he's told us what seems to be the truth.
With their sole suspect cut loose, the detectives start exploring other possibilities.
They want to try to track down if there's anybody that Ziana has been buying drugs from. Maybe this was a drug deal gone bad.
The detectives checked Ziana's phone records to see who she'd been in contact with.
It's another dead end.
Unfortunately, they don't find anything suspicious.
All of the numbers seem to be the regular people, her grandmother, her friends, Christopher. There weren't any concerns for any other numbers on her phone line.
Investigators next turn to Ziana's prior romantic relationships.
Jealousy can be a huge motive when you're looking at any murder case, especially one as personal as this one appeared to be.
They know that she was married, and they know that she has children with 3 other fathers.
So investigators start to think maybe we should just follow up on these other men that are in Ziana's life, see if there was any bad blood.
After obtaining contact information from Ziana's family, the detectives start making calls.
They make contact with her ex-husband, who she has 2 kids with, and he states that he no longer lives in Georgia.
He is very active in his children's life. They have a good relationship, co-parenting.
The father of her youngest child, they co-parent very well, so he was cleared as well.
One of the fathers, on the other hand, they really don't have a great relationship.
He's not around. Maybe he's had something to do with this.
But when the detectives speak to him, they realize it's another false lead.
Turns out he has a really good alibi.
He was at work, alibi confirmed, and so he obviously could not have done this.
It's one more frustrating setback in an investigation that seems to be going nowhere.
The fathers of her children are all accounted for.
There was no evidence of a drug crime either, at least as far as the police could tell.
They don't know where to go at this point.
They were back to square one.
Homicide.
Until an unexpected new tip comes in.
They receive a call from the therapist that had been working with the children.
Officers, in order to get the interview with the children, contacted the Child Advocacy Center and scheduled for the children to be interviewed by a forensic interviewer.
A forensic interview is so there's no bias and there's no leading questions being asked to the children and kind of getting more of a truth from the children as far as what happened.
The therapist tells detectives that during her interview with Ziana's oldest son, he made a chilling statement.
He starts talking about some of the things that he remembers from the night that Ziana died.
I heard arguing and bumping noises.
Like a thud?
He had heard a loud snap.
Then, out of nowhere, he says he killed her.
Who did the snap?
Christopher.
He told the therapist that it was Christopher who killed his mother.
"48 hours after Ziana Graham was found dead on the floor of her Marietta, Georgia home, the police investigation into her murder had slowed to a crawl.
It feels as if the trail is gone cold. Then they get a phone call.
The call is from a police therapist who's been working with the murdered woman's young children.
And as one of the children is talking to the therapist, he reveals a bombshell that could blow this case wide open.
Who did the snap?
Christopher.
According to her son, it was her boyfriend who killed her.
He told me it was Christopher who killed his mom.
The shocking accusation stuns law enforcement.
They had already interviewed Christopher and didn't think he had anything to do with this.
But now, they're starting to have second thoughts. Especially when they hear the full extent of what Ziana's son said.
Well, apparently, this guy had been physically abusive.
He reported that Christopher had beat her previously.
He's witnessed Christopher hit her, chase her, choke her.
Even the children weren't safe from Christopher's abuse.
According to the older son, Christopher has hit him a few times.
And on the night Ziana died, the young boy said he heard a familiar sound. His mother and Christopher fighting.
He was downstairs, he heard them arguing, heard it got physical.
He remembers hearing a loud bang and jostling, some aggressive conversation.
Then he heard a snap. And he realized that was his mom's neck breaking.
He heard from upstairs when it happened.
That trauma is something he's going to process and be with him for the rest of his life.
It's a damning allegation from an innocent child who has no reason to lie. But is it enough to draw up murder charges?
Putting a child on the stand can present many challenges when it comes to a case.
Children can have trouble separating make-believe from reality, and so their testimony, it isn't always rock solid.
Well, after finding out the information from Ziana's son,
All right, pull everything we have on him.
the detectives felt that Christopher needed to be looked at deeper.
While Christopher's abuse had slipped past Ziana's grandmother, conversations with other family members revealed they had long suspected something was wrong in the couple's relationship.
Ziana and her father had started to build their relationship better, so she told him something just was not right with Christopher.
When I found out who he was, I knew it felt wrong.
Dad had a feeling that the two of them were involved in some type of domestic violence.
But Ziana struggled to see a way out.
Ziana confided in her father and said, I want to get out of this relationship, but I don't know how.
What's very hard for folks to, once they're in a relationship, to get out of the cycle of abuse.
When detectives receive Ziana's autopsy results, they further implicate her boyfriend.
It was determined that she didn't have any drugs in her system. She had been drinking, but it wasn't a large amount of alcohol.
That means Christopher was lying about Ziana using cocaine. Why would he do that? Unless, of course, he was trying to lead the police down a false trail.
At this point, they're definitely sure that it's him.
But what had pushed Christopher past the point of no return?
What set him off? Did Ziana finally tell him she was leaving him?
The investigators have a whole lot of new questions that need to be answered.
To their surprise, Christopher freely agrees to come in for a follow-up interview.
They tell him that they found some new information that they just want to confirm.
All right, Chris. I want to talk to you a little bit more about what we talked about earlier. Okay? We talked about the altercation that you and Mr. Graham had. You said that you were in the bedroom. Could you kind of go through that again with me?
Christopher begins by telling the investigators the same thing he told them last time.
He's still sticking to his story that they got into it, he left.
Okay. When the incident got physical, you remember how it got physical or how it started? Grab something in the face. Is that how you got the little mark on your cheek right here? No. Yeah. Yeah. What did she swing at you? You know? I was on the baby swing.
They pressed him for more information. What were you two fighting about that night?
Christopher seems reluctant to answer, but when he finally does, it's clear why.
You can start to see a shift in his personality.
You didn't tell me what the argument was about last night. No, what? What? About their boyfriend.
As evidence piled up against him, Christopher Scarborough continued to claim innocence in the murder of his 24-year-old girlfriend, Ziana Graham.
He's sticking with his story. Yes, we were arguing, but when I left the house, she was fine. She was alive.
But now he just admitted the shocking reason why he and Ziana were fighting. She had gotten an abortion without telling him.
Mr. Scarborough and Ziana had started dating approximately 7 months prior to this incident.
While they were together, Ziana got pregnant.
Christopher was very excited about the pregnancy. It would have been his first biological child.
But instead of celebrating new life, Christopher found himself mourning what could have been.
Ziana told him that she had lost a baby.
You said it was a miscarriage. I bet you did.
He soon learned that was a lie.
He had gotten a Facebook message from someone very close to Ziana.
Tell me about how Ziana got an abortion.
That's how he found out that it was an abortion and not a miscarriage. And that's what triggered him.
You said that you guys got in this argument. Yeah. And then it was over the incident with her, with the abortion incident, right? Yeah.
He said he may have overreacted.
I can't believe you went behind my back.
I didn't go behind your back.
Yes, you did.
I did what was best for me.
He was really, really upset about this.
But he insists he didn't kill Ziana until detectives start to roll out the evidence against him.
They hit him with the abuse and the statement from Ziana's oldest son.
They said, Christopher, we know you've done this. You need to come clean.
When you left there, she wasn't talking to you. And you know that. You knew it all along. I just need to know what happened. I know that you grabbed her on the neck. I know that. Can you tell me what happened? Did you throw her on the ground?
Christopher reported that Ziana was very angry that night. She was yelling, screaming. She hit him with a toy, and he was trying to calm her down. So the way he thought to calm her down was just to restrain her.
He just grabbed you. How'd you grab her? Like this?
That's why I didn't tell you the truth, because I knew you would act like this.
She was pulling away from him, resisting him.
He admitted to putting his hands around her neck.
So you grabbed her on the neck. Did you squeeze her hard? Do you remember how long you choked her?
Christopher began to cry, and he did admit that he strangled Ziana until he heard her neck break.
He said that he recognized that she was dead, lying on the floor, before he left the house and went to his mother's.
It's all the investigators need to hear.
At this point, the investigators have a full confession. They understand what happened, and Chris has admitted his role in Ziana's death. And they charge him with aggravated assault, malice murder, and cruelty to children because her 4 children were present at the home when all of this happened.
Christopher is left with few options.
Given all the evidence against him, given the fact that he has now confessed to his role in Ziana's death, it's starting to ring true that he will probably get whatever penalties are coming to him.
He talks to his attorney and finds out, because of his lengthy criminal history, that with this additional charge, it's possible for him to go to prison for life without parole. And he doesn't want that.
So he decides to cut a deal.
Christopher decided to take a plea deal instead of going to trial.
He pleads to malice murder and cruelty to children in the 3rd degree.
He was sentenced to life with the possibility of parole.
For Ziana's family, it's too little, too late.
I would have rather have gone to trial. So I realized that now that he confessed and turned himself in and all that, his punishment could be a little bit less. Yeah, that upsets me. Of course it would upset anybody.
The good news is, because of those felonies on his record, the possibility that he'll get parole is likely none.
In Georgia, he'd have to serve a minimum of 30 years before he would be eligible for parole. Ultimately, it's up to the parole board as to whether he will ever parole out.
Whether or not Christopher is ever released from prison, his violent actions will never stop reverberating through the lives of Ziana Graham's children.
They were in the house when it happened, and this is going to live with them for the rest of their life.
Those children, they never forget, that trauma follows them throughout their lives.
This was so much more than one murder. In a lot of ways, this was the destruction of an entire family.
I miss her so much. It's been a lot of work, a lot of counselors, a lot of therapy. I want her to know that I'm doing the best. I'm doing the best I can with the kids, and I hope they're happy. I hope they know love. I hope they know how much their mother loved them. And she did. She loved them very much.
New York City was already afraid before the killings began. In the summer of 1977, fear hung over the city like humidity. It drifted through crowded subway stations, lingered beneath flickering streetlights, and followed people home after dark. Crime was not unusual in New York during the 1970s. Sirens were part of the city's soundtrack. Newspaper headlines screamed about robberies, assaults, blackouts, and violence. Residents had learned to live with uncertainty. But this was different. This fear had no face. No one knew where it would appear next. No one knew who would become the next victim. And most terrifying of all, no one knew why. Late at night, couples parked along quiet streets suddenly found themselves looking over their shoulders. Young women stopped wearing their hair the way they liked. Parents warned their children not to stay out after sunset. Taxi drivers checked their mirrors more often. Every strange shadow seemed suspicious. Every unknown car seemed threatening. Somewhere in the darkness, a man was hunting. Not for money. Not for revenge. Not because he knew his victims. He hunted strangers. And he enjoyed watching an entire city panic. The newspapers gave him a name before they knew who he was. The .44 caliber killer. A title that sounded less like a human being and more like a force of nature. A storm. A plague. A nightmare. The murders appeared random. The victims seemed connected only by terrible luck. There were no obvious motives. No personal relationships. No warnings. No demands. Just sudden violence. A parked car. A flash. Gunfire. Then silence. The city watched in horror as the body count grew. The police launched one of the largest investigations in New York history. Detectives worked endless shifts. Thousands of leads flooded in. Witness descriptions contradicted one another. Suspects emerged and disappeared. Every promising clue seemed to dissolve into nothing. The killer remained invisible. Then he did something unexpected. Something that transformed a local murder investigation into a national obsession. He started writing letters. Letters to the police. Letters to journalists. Letters filled with taunts, cryptic messages, and disturbing fantasies. The words revealed something chilling. The killer wanted attention. He wanted people to fear him. He wanted the city to know he existed. And with every newspaper publication, he became more powerful. People clipped articles and discussed them at dinner tables. Radio hosts debated his identity. Television reports replayed the latest developments. The unknown gunman became a celebrity of terror. Then came the letter that introduced a name the world would never forget. Son of Sam. It sounded bizarre. Almost ridiculous. Yet within days it appeared everywhere. On television. On front pages. In conversations between strangers. The name spread faster than the investigation itself. And while millions wondered who Son of Sam was, the man behind the name walked unnoticed through ordinary neighborhoods. He bought groceries. He drove to work. He exchanged casual greetings with people who had no idea they were speaking to one of the most feared killers in America. That contradiction would later shock investigators. The monster wasn't hiding in abandoned buildings or lurking in remote forests. He lived among everyone else. Invisible. Ordinary. Forgettable. At least on the surface. But long before his arrest, before the headlines, before the courtroom appearances and psychological evaluations, there was another story unfolding beneath the crimes. A story of isolation. A story of obsession. A story of a man whose inner world became darker and darker until fantasy and reality blurred together. To understand how New York fell into terror, we must first understand the era itself. Because Son of Sam did not emerge from nowhere. He appeared during one of the most troubled periods in the city's history. The New York of the 1970s was a place unlike the city tourists know today. Entire neighborhoods struggled with poverty. Buildings stood abandoned. Graffiti covered subway cars from end to end. The city faced financial collapse. Violent crime dominated headlines. Many residents felt abandoned by institutions that seemed unable to maintain order. The atmosphere was tense. People were angry. People were exhausted. People were frightened. It was the perfect environment for panic to spread. And panic spreads quickly when it feeds on uncertainty. Imagine living in New York during those months. You wake up in the morning and unfold the newspaper. Another shooting. Another victim. Another police statement admitting they still don't know who is responsible. You leave for work. People discuss the case on the train. Co-workers speculate about suspects. Rumors spread faster than facts. Every day brings more questions than answers. At night, the fear grows stronger. Streetlights create long shadows. Passing footsteps sound louder. An unfamiliar face causes immediate suspicion. You begin noticing details you never paid attention to before. A parked car. A man standing alone. Someone watching from across the street. Ordinary moments become sources of anxiety. That was the reality for millions of New Yorkers. And the killer understood exactly what he was creating. His crimes were not simply murders. They were performances. Each attack generated headlines. Each headline generated fear. Each fearful reaction gave him satisfaction. For a predator obsessed with power, there was no greater reward than controlling the emotions of an entire city. The victims themselves never saw it coming. Most were simply enjoying ordinary evenings. Talking with friends. Sitting in parked cars. Planning futures they believed were waiting for them. Moments later, everything changed. Lives ended. Families shattered. Communities entered mourning. Yet while investigators documented evidence and grieving relatives planned funerals, the killer remained free. Watching. Waiting. Preparing. The randomness of the attacks created a unique form of terror. People naturally seek patterns. Patterns help us feel safe. If danger follows rules, we can avoid it. If victims share certain behaviors, we can change our own. If crimes happen only in specific locations, we can stay away. But Son of Sam offered no comforting pattern. The attacks seemed arbitrary. The victims appeared ordinary. The locations varied. No one could confidently predict where he would strike next. And when people cannot predict danger, they begin seeing danger everywhere. This psychological effect transformed the investigation into something larger than a criminal case. It became a social phenomenon. Fear altered behavior across New York. Women changed hairstyles, because rumors suggested the killer targeted those with long dark hair. Couples avoided secluded areas. Parents imposed stricter curfews. Businesses noticed changes in customer habits. The city itself seemed to contract inward. People became more cautious. More suspicious. More fearful. The killer's physical weapon was a .44 caliber revolver. But his most powerful weapon was uncertainty. The bullets injured individuals. The uncertainty wounded an entire city. As months passed, pressure mounted on law enforcement. Every new attack intensified public frustration. Citizens demanded answers. Politicians demanded progress. Newspapers criticized the investigation. Detectives knew the clock was ticking. Every day, without an arrest, increased the possibility of another murder. Some investigators barely slept. Others followed leads that consumed weeks before collapsing completely. Thousands of names crossed police desks. Thousands of interviews were conducted. Thousands of hours were invested. Yet the killer remained free. Then came the letters. And suddenly the investigation changed. The mystery now had a voice. A disturbing, arrogant, unsettling voice. The letters offered glimpses into the killer's mind. Not clear explanations. Not genuine confessions. Just fragments. Hints. Taunts. The words suggested someone who enjoyed manipulation. Someone who understood the impact of publicity. Someone who viewed fear as a form of entertainment. For the public, the letters made the threat feel even more real. The killer was no longer just an unknown gunman. He had become a character. A personality. A presence lurking behind every headline. People read his words and imagined the man writing them. What did he look like? How did he spend his days? Was he reading the same newspapers as everyone else? Was he standing nearby while people discussed the murders? Could he be a neighbor? A co-worker? A stranger sitting across from them on the subway? Those questions haunted the city. Because the truth was often closer than anyone imagined. The man responsible was not operating from a secret underground hideout. He was not a criminal mastermind living beyond society. He moved through everyday life unnoticed. That reality would eventually become one of the most disturbing aspects of the entire case. When his identity was finally revealed, many people struggled to reconcile the ordinary appearance of David Berkowitz with the terror associated with the name Son of Sam. The face seemed wrong. Too normal. Too familiar. Too human. But evil rarely announces itself. It rarely arrives wearing a warning sign. Sometimes it lives quietly behind apartment walls. Sometimes it smiles politely. Sometimes it waits patiently. And sometimes, for 13 months, it holds one of the largest cities in the world hostage through fear alone. This is the story of that fear. The story of the victims whose lives were stolen. The story of detectives chasing a ghost through the streets of New York. The story of a killer who turned media attention into a weapon. And the story of how an entire city became trapped inside a nightmare that felt impossible to escape. Before the first arrest. Before the courtroom confessions. Before the headlines finally declared the hunt over. There was only darkness. A parked car. A figure approaching from the shadows. And a city that had no idea its worst nightmare was just beginning. Part 2, the setting. To understand the terror of Son of Sam, you first have to understand New York City before the name existed. The city was not merely a backdrop to the story. It was a character in it. A wounded, restless, exhausted character struggling to survive. In the mid-1970s, New York looked very different from the city millions of tourists visit today. The gleaming skyscrapers were still there, piercing the skyline above Manhattan, but beneath them was a city under pressure. Economic crisis had left scars across entire neighborhoods. Unemployment remained stubbornly high. Many middle-class families were leaving for the suburbs. Apartment buildings sat abandoned. Some landlords, unable to profit from their properties, simply walked away. Entire blocks felt forgotten. Graffiti stretched across subway cars like colorful wounds. Street lights flickered over cracked sidewalks. Empty lots collected trash and broken furniture. In some neighborhoods, the sound of police sirens was so common that residents barely looked up when they heard them. New Yorkers were resilient. They had to be. Every day demanded it. The city woke before dawn. Construction workers grabbed coffee from corner diners. Secretaries hurried toward subway entrances. Taxi drivers began 12-hour shifts. Shop owners unlocked gates and swept sidewalks. Life moved forward because it had no choice. But beneath the movement was anxiety. People felt it in conversations. They felt it in newspaper headlines. They felt it every time another crime report appeared on the evening news. Violence had become part of everyday life. Muggings, burglaries, shootings, car thefts. The numbers climbed year after year. Parents worried about their children. Children learned which streets to avoid. Teenagers grew up understanding that danger could appear unexpectedly. Trust became harder to maintain. Fear became easier. The summer of 1976 arrived carrying heavy heat and heavier uncertainty. No one could predict that a killer was about to emerge. No one could imagine how deeply that killer would affect the city's psychology. At the center of the coming storm was a man named David Berkowitz. At first glance, there was nothing remarkable about him. No obvious warning signs. No dramatic criminal reputation. No public image that hinted at the nightmare he would eventually create. He blended into the background. The kind of person people passed without remembering. Yet behind that ordinary appearance existed a life shaped by loneliness. David Richard Berkowitz was born on June 1, 1953. His story began with abandonment. His biological mother gave him up shortly after birth, and he was adopted by Nathan and Pearl Berkowitz, a working-class couple from the Bronx. For a time, his childhood appeared relatively normal. His adoptive parents loved him. They provided stability. They gave him a home. But even as a child, David often seemed disconnected from the people around him. Neighbors later remembered a boy who struggled socially. Teachers noticed behavioral issues. Other children sometimes found him difficult to understand. He could be moody, withdrawn, angry without clear explanation. As he grew older, those feelings intensified. Adolescence brought questions about identity. Questions about belonging. Questions about why he often felt different from everyone else. The discovery that he had been adopted affected him deeply. For some adopted children, the information becomes one piece of their life story. For David, it became something larger. A wound. An obsession. A source of emotional instability. He searched for meaning in his origins. He searched for explanations for feelings he could not articulate. And when those explanations failed to appear, resentment slowly grew. His mother, Pearl, died when he was still young. The loss devastated him. Friends later described a noticeable change afterward. The grief settled inside him and never seemed to leave. Years passed. He joined the army. Military service offered structure and routine. For a while, it appeared to provide direction. But when his service ended and he returned to civilian life, the same feelings resurfaced. Isolation. Frustration. Alienation. He drifted through ordinary existence. Jobs came and went. Relationships never flourished. Social connections remained limited. People who encountered him often described him as quiet, awkward, forgettable. Yet beneath that exterior, something darker was taking shape. While Berkowitz struggled with his personal demons, New York continued evolving around him. The city never truly slept. Even after midnight, traffic flowed through Manhattan streets. Neon signs illuminated storefronts. Music spilled from bars and clubs. Young couples searched for privacy in parked cars. Friends gathered in neighborhoods across the boroughs. Life continued. People celebrated birthdays, planned weddings, started careers, fell in love. The future felt wide open. That optimism existed despite the city's hardships, especially among young people. Many of the future victims belonged to that generation. They were ordinary individuals building ordinary lives. They had dreams, families, friends, plans for tomorrow. The tragedy of the Son of Sam case lies not only in the violence itself, but in the interruption of those futures. Every victim carried a story. Every victim mattered long before becoming a headline. But at this stage of the story, none of them knew their names would someday become connected by one of the most infamous murder investigations in American history. As 1976 progressed, New York entered another sweltering summer. The heat lingered after sunset. Apartment windows remained open. People spent evenings outdoors seeking relief from cramped living spaces. Parks filled with visitors. Restaurants stayed busy. Cars lined residential streets. The city felt alive. And somewhere within that living city, David Berkowitz was moving through his own routine. Driving familiar roads. Working regular shifts. Living in relative anonymity. To neighbors, he seemed ordinary. To co-workers, unremarkable. To strangers, invisible. The contrast between appearance and reality would later become one of the most disturbing elements of the case. Human beings often expect evil to look different. We imagine monsters as visibly monstrous. We assume danger announces itself. Reality rarely cooperates. The most frightening predators often appear normal. That normality becomes camouflage. And Berkowitz wore that camouflage well. As historians and criminologists later examined his life, they searched for turning points. Moments when intervention might have changed the outcome. Moments when warning signs might have been recognized. The answers remain frustratingly unclear. There was no single event that transformed him overnight. No dramatic catalyst. Instead, there appears to have been a gradual accumulation of psychological distress. Loneliness layered upon resentment. Resentment layered upon fantasy. Fantasy layered upon obsession. Over time, the boundaries separating reality from imagination began to weaken. Inside his mind, narratives developed. Stories that helped explain his anger. Stories that justified his impulses. Stories that eventually became intertwined with violence. Yet none of this was visible to the city around him. New York remained focused on its own challenges. Political debates dominated headlines. Economic concerns occupied public attention. Crime statistics worried residents. No one was searching for an unknown serial killer. Because no serial killer had announced himself yet. That would change on a warm July night. But before that night arrived, there existed a brief period when all possibilities remained open. The victims were alive. The families were intact. The city was troubled but unaware. Looking backward from history, those moments feel almost haunting. We know what is coming. They did not. A young woman laughs with a friend. A couple plans a weekend date. Parents expect their children home later that evening. Neighbors sit on apartment stoops discussing ordinary concerns. Life unfolds normally. The future appears predictable. Safe enough. Then violence enters without warning. That is the true horror of cases like this. Not merely death, but interruption. The sudden destruction of ordinary life. The transformation of everyday moments into final moments. As summer deepened, New York continued breathing beneath the weight of heat and uncertainty. Subway trains rattled through tunnels. Taxi horns echoed between buildings. Music drifted from open windows. The city moved with its familiar rhythm. No one knew that within weeks newspaper headlines would begin chronicling a new nightmare. No one knew detectives would soon find themselves chasing a phantom across borough lines. No one knew the words, "Son of Sam," would eventually become part of criminal history. For now, there was only the city. A city wounded but functioning. A city frightened by crime, but not yet terrified. A city filled with millions of individual stories moving toward an unknown future. And among those millions walked a man carrying secrets no one could see. A man whose name meant nothing. A man who blended effortlessly into crowds. A man who had already begun drifting toward darkness. The streets of New York stretched before him. The summer nights grew longer. The city remained unaware. But the countdown had already begun. Soon, a parked car in the Bronx would become the scene of unimaginable violence. Soon, detectives would encounter a mystery unlike any they had faced before. Soon, fear would spread from neighborhood to neighborhood like a living thing. And soon, the city would discover that its nightmare had already been quietly waiting among them. Part 3. The Victim Stories. Long before the newspapers printed the words "Son of Sam," before detectives assembled task forces, and before fear spread through every borough of New York City, there were simply young people living ordinary lives. They were daughters, sons, friends, students, dreamers. People whose futures stretched ahead of them with all the uncertainty and excitement that youth naturally brings. The tragedy of the Son of Sam murders is often told through the actions of the killer. The headlines focus on the investigation, the letters, the manhunt, and the arrest. But hidden behind those dramatic events are the people who paid the highest price. To understand the true weight of this case, we must begin with them. Because every victim had a story before becoming a victim. Every life mattered before becoming evidence. Every name represented an entire world. One of those worlds belonged to an 18-year-old girl named Donna Lauria. In the summer of 1976, Donna stood at the beginning of adulthood. Friends described her as warm, energetic, and full of plans. Like many young women her age, she was balancing dreams with reality. She laughed easily. She enjoyed spending time with friends. She imagined a future that seemed limitless. Nothing about her life suggested that history would remember her name. She wasn't famous. She wasn't wealthy. She wasn't involved in anything dangerous. She was simply a young woman trying to enjoy her youth. On the evening of July 29, 1976, Donna spent time with her friend, Jody Valenti. The two young women had no reason to believe the night would be different from countless others. The Bronx air remained warm even after sunset. Streetlights cast pale pools of yellow across quiet residential roads. Cars lined curbs. Apartment windows glowed softly. Televisions flickered behind curtains. Families settled into their evening routines. The city seemed calm. Safe enough. Donna and Jody eventually sat together inside a parked car. They talked. Laughed. Shared the kinds of conversations that seem ordinary at the time, but become priceless in hindsight. Perhaps they discussed future plans. Perhaps they talked about work, friends, or relationships. No one can know exactly what was said during those final moments. What we do know is that nothing suggested danger was approaching. Then a stranger appeared. Within seconds, everything changed. A man approached the vehicle. A paper bag concealed something in his hand. Before the young women could fully process what was happening, gunfire shattered the quiet night. The attack was sudden, brutal, without warning. Donna Lauria was struck and killed. Jody Valenti suffered severe injuries but survived. One young life ended. Another would carry the memory forever. Inside Donna's family home, the news arrived like a nightmare. There is a unique cruelty in sudden violence. Families do not receive preparation. There is no gradual adjustment. One moment a loved one exists in the world. The next moment they do not. Parents who had expected to see their daughter again were instead confronted with unimaginable grief. Friends struggled to comprehend what had happened. The future they had imagined with Donna disappeared overnight. Investigators initially viewed the shooting as a terrible crime, but not necessarily the beginning of a serial murder case. At that moment, no one knew the attack represented the first chapter of something far larger. The city mourned one victim. Soon it would mourn many more. Months passed. The killer remained free. And somewhere else in New York, another young life was moving toward a fate no one could predict. 20-year-old Carl Denaro had plans of his own. Friends knew him as outgoing and sociable. Like many young men in New York, he enjoyed spending evenings with friends and exploring the city. He was building a future one day at a time. On a night in October 1976, Carl and a friend were sitting in a parked car in Queens. The setting felt familiar, comfortable, ordinary. The kind of scene repeated thousands of times across the city every evening. Yet hidden somewhere nearby was the same predator responsible for Donna Lauria's death. Again, there was no warning. No confrontation. No argument. Just sudden violence. Gunfire erupted. Carl survived, but serious injuries altered his life forever. The attack left physical wounds, but the psychological scars would prove equally significant. Survivors of violent crime often describe a permanent shift in how they view the world. Places that once felt safe become threatening. Normal routines become sources of anxiety. Trust becomes more difficult. For Carl and other survivors, healing involved far more than recovering from physical injuries. Meanwhile, detectives noticed troubling similarities between the shootings. The same weapon appeared connected to multiple attacks. The possibility of a serial offender emerged. Yet the pattern remained incomplete. The killer continued moving through the city unseen. The next victims would further deepen the mystery. On November 27, 1976, two teenagers, Donna DeMasi and Joanne Lomino, spent an evening together. They were young, full of energy, enjoying a typical night. Nothing extraordinary. Nothing unusual. Just two friends, sharing time together. As they walked home through their neighborhood, danger appeared once again without warning. Shots rang out. Both young women collapsed. Miraculously, neither died. But survival did not mean escape from tragedy. Joanne Lomino suffered catastrophic injuries. The attack left her paralyzed. In an instant, a teenage girl lost the future she had expected. The life she imagined vanished. The dreams that once felt inevitable suddenly became uncertain. Years later, her story would remain one of the most heartbreaking consequences of the Son of Sam crimes. Because murder statistics can sometimes obscure reality. Numbers do not capture suffering. Numbers do not explain rehabilitation. Numbers do not describe families adapting to permanent disability. The survivors carried consequences long after the headlines faded. As investigators searched for answers, another young couple unknowingly entered the killer's path. On January 30, 1977, 26-year-old Christine Freund and her fiancé, John Deal, sat together in a parked vehicle. Like many couples, they were enjoying private time together, planning a future, sharing ordinary moments, perhaps discussing their wedding, perhaps imagining the years ahead. Then came the gunshots. Christine was struck. John was wounded. Although Christine initially survived, her injuries proved fatal. She died later in the hospital. For her family, grief mixed with disbelief. A woman preparing for marriage had become another victim in a growing series of unexplained attacks. The killer had stolen not only a life, but an entire future. A wedding that would never occur. Children who would never be born. Memories that would never be created. This is one of the hidden tragedies of homicide. The loss extends beyond the victim. Entire futures disappear. Entire family trees change direction. Entire communities lose something irreplaceable. By early 1977, fear had begun spreading throughout New York. Yet life continued. People still fell in love. Still met friends. Still parked their cars beneath city lights. And among those ordinary people were Virginia Voskorichin and later Stacy Moskowitz. Virginia was a young woman with ambitions and independence. On March 8, 1977, she walked home through Queens carrying textbooks. The future occupied her thoughts. Not danger. Not death. Just the normal concerns of a young person moving through daily life. The attack came suddenly. Witnesses later described a terrifyingly brief encounter. Virginia had no meaningful opportunity to defend herself. Her death reinforced an unsettling truth. The killer's victim selection seemed increasingly unpredictable. No one could confidently explain who might be targeted next. That uncertainty fueled public panic. Then came Stacy Moskowitz, the final murder victim. The name that would become forever connected to the end of the Son of Sam reign of terror. Stacy was 20 years old. Bright. Popular. Loved by family and friends. Those who knew her remembered a young woman filled with life. The type of person who made others feel comfortable. The type of person whose presence improved a room. On July 31, 1977, she spent the evening with her boyfriend, Robert Violante. Like countless young couples before them, they sought privacy inside a parked car. The summer air felt heavy. The city seemed peaceful. There was no indication that this ordinary date would become a historical tragedy. Then the gunman appeared. Shots shattered the night. Stacy suffered fatal injuries. Robert survived but endured devastating damage to his eyesight. One young woman lost her life. One young man lost part of his future. Two families entered a nightmare. For investigators, the attack marked a crucial turning point. For loved ones, it marked the worst day of their lives. And that distinction matters. True crime history often focuses on investigations, because investigations provide answers. But the victims experienced something entirely different. They experienced loss. Shock. Trauma. The permanent absence of someone they loved. Behind every newspaper headline stood grieving parents identifying bodies. Friends attending funerals. Siblings struggling to comprehend reality. Empty chairs at family gatherings. Birthdays celebrated without the people who should have been present. Years passed. Decades passed. Yet many families never fully escaped the shadow cast by those murders. Because grief does not follow a schedule. It does not conclude when a trial ends. It does not disappear when a killer is imprisoned. It simply changes shape. The Son of Sam case would eventually become famous because of the killer. But history should remember the victims first. Donna Lauria, Christine Freund, Virginia Voskerichen, Stacy Moskowitz, and the survivors whose lives changed forever. They were not characters in someone else's story. They were the story. Young people with hopes, fears, and futures. People who woke up expecting ordinary days. People who never imagined their names would become part of criminal history. As New York's fear continued growing and detectives struggled to identify the mysterious gunman, the city remained focused on a single question. Who was responsible? But another question was equally important. How many more lives would be destroyed before the answer arrived? The investigation was about to intensify. The public panic was about to deepen. And somewhere in New York, the man responsible was already preparing for what came next. Part 4: The Incidents. The first shot did not just kill a young woman. It awakened a nightmare. On the night of July 29, 1976, New York City was moving through another ordinary summer evening. The air over the Bronx remained warm long after sunset. Apartment windows were open. Radios played softly in living rooms. Cars rolled through neighborhood streets beneath the glow of streetlights. Nothing seemed unusual. Nothing suggested history was about to change. At approximately 1 o'clock in the morning, 18-year-old Donna Lauria and her friend Jody Valenti returned to their neighborhood after spending time together. The two young women sat inside a parked Oldsmobile outside Donna's home on Hutchinson River Parkway. It was the kind of moment that happens every day. Two friends talking before saying goodnight. Neither woman knew they were being watched. Neither woman knew a stranger was approaching through the darkness. The street appeared quiet. Peaceful. Safe. Then a figure emerged. A stocky young man walked toward the vehicle. In his hand was a paper bag. There was no argument. No warning. No confrontation. The man simply stepped closer, reached into the bag, and drew a revolver. The first gunshots shattered the silence. Glass exploded. Metal echoed. Panic replaced ordinary conversation in an instant. Inside the vehicle, confusion became terror. Donna never had a chance. The bullet struck her with devastating force. Jody screamed as pain ripped through her body. The attack lasted only seconds. Then it was over. The gunman disappeared into the darkness as quickly as he had appeared. Behind him he left chaos. Blood stained the car seats. Neighbors rushed outside. Emergency vehicles screamed through the night. Police officers arrived expecting to investigate another shooting. At that moment, nobody understood what they were witnessing. One dead teenager. One wounded survivor. A tragic crime. Nothing more. Or so they believed. As detectives processed the scene, they searched for motives. Did the victims know the attacker? Was this a personal dispute? A robbery gone wrong? A jealous lover? The answers seemed frustratingly absent. The victims had no connection to a violent lifestyle. There was no obvious explanation. The crime felt random. Investigators disliked randomness. Randomness was difficult to solve. Yet there was little evidence suggesting anything else. The case remained open. The killer remained free. And somewhere in the city, David Berkowitz returned to his ordinary life. For nearly 3 months, New York saw no clear pattern. Life moved forward. The murder of Donna Lauria slowly became one more tragedy among many in a city already overwhelmed by violence. Then October arrived. And the killer struck again. Late on the evening of October 23, 1976, Carl Denaro and Rosemary Keenan sat together inside a parked vehicle in Queens. The setting looked remarkably familiar. A quiet area. A young couple. A sense of privacy. A feeling of safety. The same circumstances that had existed before the attack in the Bronx. Again, the killer approached without warning. Again, there was no meaningful interaction. No demands. No conversation. Only violence. Gunfire erupted. The bullets tore through the vehicle. Carl suffered severe head injuries. Rosemary escaped physical injury, but the emotional trauma would remain. Witnesses described confusion. Shock. People running toward the scene. Others running away. Police officers soon realized something unsettling. The ballistic evidence resembled the Bronx murder. The same type of weapon. The same sudden approach. The same apparent lack of motive. A possibility began forming. What if these crimes were connected? What if the city was dealing with something far more dangerous than isolated shootings? Detectives could not yet prove it. But the thought lingered. The fear grew. The killer waited. Then came November. By now, winter's arrival could be felt in the air. The city streets grew colder. The daylight disappeared earlier each evening. On November 27th, two teenage girls, Donna DeMazy and Joanne Lomino, spent time together in Queens. The night seemed entirely normal. Families watched television. Stores closed for the evening. The neighborhood settled into quiet routines. As the girls walked home, neither noticed danger nearby. Then the darkness exploded. A stranger appeared. Gunshots echoed across the street. Both teenagers collapsed. Screams pierced the night. Residents rushed outside. Some froze in disbelief. Others ran toward the victims. Joanne suffered devastating injuries. Her life changed forever within seconds. Doctors fought to save her. Family members gathered at hospitals praying for miracles. The attack shocked the community. Now investigators could no longer dismiss coincidence. The similarities were becoming impossible to ignore. Young victims. Nighttime attacks. Little or no interaction. A .44 caliber revolver. An unknown assailant disappearing before police arrived. The city might have a serial shooter. That realization transformed the investigation. Resources increased. Detectives compared reports. Ballistics experts re-examined evidence. Patterns emerged slowly, like shapes appearing through fog. Meanwhile, the man responsible continued living unnoticed. He worked. Drove through neighborhoods. Bought groceries. Passed strangers on sidewalks. No one looked at him twice. No one suspected the quiet man moving through ordinary routines was responsible for so much suffering. Then the violence escalated again. January 30, 1977. The cold gripped New York. Snow and ice lingered along curbs. People hurried through winter nights with collars raised against the freezing air. Inside a parked car in Queens, 26-year-old Christine Freund sat with her fiancé, John Deal. The couple was building a future together. Marriage plans occupied their thoughts. The excitement of a shared life stretched ahead. Then came the gunfire. Without warning, bullets ripped through the vehicle. The attack followed the now familiar pattern. Fast. Silent. Merciless. Christine suffered catastrophic injuries. John was wounded. Paramedics fought to save them. Hospitals became scenes of desperate hope. Families gathered in waiting rooms. Doctors worked through the night. For a brief moment, it appeared Christine might survive. But the damage was too severe. She died later from her injuries. Another future vanished. Another family entered mourning. Another headline appeared. The city reacted with growing alarm. The killer was not stopping. He was becoming more confident. And investigators still lacked a name. The pressure intensified. Every failed lead felt heavier than the last. Every passing day increased the possibility of another attack. Then March arrived. By now, fear was spreading through New York like a disease. People talked about the shootings everywhere. At work. At school. Inside restaurants. On subway platforms. The unknown gunman occupied public imagination. No one knew who he was. But everyone seemed to have a theory. On March 8, 1977, 19-year-old Virginia Voskerichen walked home through Queens carrying textbooks. She was a student. Focused on her future. Concerned with the ordinary challenges of young adulthood. As she moved along the sidewalk, she probably thought about classes, friends, or plans for the following day. Then she encountered the killer. The attack unfolded in horrifying simplicity. A gun. A shot. A life ended. Virginia collapsed. Witnesses later recalled scenes of confusion and disbelief. The randomness of the crime terrified residents. This victim had not been sitting inside a parked vehicle. The pattern had shifted. If the killer could attack someone simply walking home, who was safe? The answer seemed increasingly clear. No one. The city entered a state approaching panic. Women altered hairstyles, because rumors suggested the shooter preferred victims with long dark hair. Parents imposed curfews. Couples avoided isolated locations. People watched strangers more carefully. The fear became part of daily life. And then the killer decided he wanted something more. Attention. Recognition. Control. That desire would soon transform the investigation forever. The letters began appearing. The messages taunted authorities. Mocked investigators. Demanded publicity. The unknown shooter was no longer content with murder alone. He wanted an audience. He wanted New York to know his name. Or at least the name he had created for himself. Son of Sam. The words exploded across newspaper front pages. Suddenly the case became larger than a murder investigation. It became a media sensation. The killer had given the public a character to fear. And fear multiplied. But while reporters analyzed letters and detectives chased clues, the violence continued. The final attack occurred on July 31, 1977. The summer heat had returned. The city baked beneath another humid New York evening. 20-year-old Stacy Moskowitz and her boyfriend Robert Violante sat together in a parked vehicle in Brooklyn. Like so many victims before them, they believed they were alone. The night felt ordinary. Quiet. Safe enough. Then history repeated itself one last time. A shadow approached. A revolver appeared. Gunfire erupted. The attack lasted mere moments. Yet its consequences would last forever. Stacy suffered fatal injuries. Robert survived but endured devastating damage to his eyesight. Emergency responders rushed to the scene. Detectives arrived shortly afterward. The familiar horror confronted them once again. Blood. Broken glass. Witness statements. Questions without answers. But something was different this time. Unnoticed among the confusion was a tiny detail. A detail so insignificant that it could easily have been forgotten. A witness remembered seeing a parking ticket issued nearby that night. At the time, it seemed meaningless. Just another routine interaction on a city street. Yet that forgotten observation would eventually become the thread that unraveled the entire mystery. For 13 months, the killer had moved through New York like a ghost. He appeared without warning. Killed without hesitation. Disappeared without trace. His attacks transformed ordinary locations into crime scenes and ordinary evenings into nightmares. He left behind grieving families, wounded survivors, terrified communities, and frustrated investigators. But after the final attack, the invisible predator was running out of luck. The incidents that had spread fear across an entire city were finally creating a trail. And for the first time since that summer night in the Bronx, the darkness surrounding the killer was beginning to crack. The hunt was about to enter its most important chapter. And the man known as Son of Sam had no idea that his freedom was rapidly coming to an end. Part 5: The Discovery. By the spring of 1977, New York City was no longer dealing with a series of mysterious shootings. It was living under siege. The fear that had begun as confusion was now something larger. It lingered in conversations, dominated newspaper headlines, and followed people home at night. Every new attack deepened the sense that an invisible predator was moving through the city at will. For detectives, each crime scene represented an opportunity. For families, each crime scene represented devastation. And for the killer, each crime scene represented success. The investigation expanded with every attack. Thousands of tips arrived. Witnesses described suspicious men. Psychics offered theories. Citizens reported neighbors. Former girlfriends called police hotlines. Strangers accused strangers. The flood of information became both a blessing and a curse. Among thousands of possibilities, the truth remained hidden. The earliest crime scenes offered little comfort. When investigators examined the vehicle where Donna Lauria had been killed, they encountered a frustrating reality. The killer had left almost nothing behind. No fingerprints. No clear witness identification. No obvious motive. The attack itself had lasted only seconds. By the time police arrived, the gunman had vanished. The scene contained evidence, but evidence without context. Bullet casings. Damage patterns. Medical reports. Photographs. Measurements. Every detail was carefully documented. Yet none of it revealed the identity of the man responsible. Detectives reconstructed the attack repeatedly. They studied the position of the vehicle, the angle of the shots, the probable movement of the gunman, the escape routes available from the location. Again and again, they arrived at the same conclusion. The shooter appeared organized, careful, disciplined. He approached quickly, fired efficiently, left immediately. There was no sign of panic. No indication of hesitation. The crime felt practiced. As additional attacks occurred, investigators began comparing every available piece of evidence. Crime scene photographs covered walls. Maps displayed attack locations. Ballistic reports accumulated in growing stacks. Patterns slowly emerged. The same .44 caliber revolver connected multiple shootings. The same preference for nighttime attacks appeared repeatedly. The same rapid escape followed each incident. Some detectives believed they were dealing with a highly intelligent offender. Others disagreed. They argued that luck played a major role. The killer was making mistakes. The problem was that nobody had identified them yet. The city demanded answers. The police demanded results. The pressure became enormous. At headquarters, investigators worked exhausting hours. Coffee cups accumulated on desks. Ashtrays filled throughout the night. Detectives studied witness statements until their eyes blurred. Some returned home only long enough to sleep before reporting back for another shift. The investigation had become personal. Every new victim increased the urgency. Every failed lead increased frustration. Meanwhile, the crime scenes continued telling their silent story. The attack on Carl Denaro presented similar challenges. Witness descriptions varied dramatically. Some recalled a young man. Others remembered an older individual. Hair color changed depending on who was speaking. Height estimates differed. Facial features seemed inconsistent. The problem with eyewitness testimony became painfully obvious. Human memory is imperfect. Fear distorts observation. Moments of trauma often create confusion rather than clarity. Detectives chased countless descriptions that ultimately led nowhere. One witness seemed promising. Then another contradicted the account. A suspect appeared viable. Then an alibi eliminated him. Again and again, the investigation hit dead ends. After the shooting of Donna DeMasi and Joanne Lomino, police intensified their analysis. Joanne's survival provided investigators with another valuable perspective. Survivors sometimes notice details that witnesses miss. A movement. A silhouette. A voice. A behavior. Detectives conducted lengthy interviews. Every memory mattered. Every observation was recorded. Yet even survivor accounts provided only fragments. The killer remained frustratingly out of reach. As months passed, investigators began recognizing something psychologically disturbing. The offender appeared emotionally detached from his victims. There was no indication that he knew them personally. No evidence of robbery. No sexual assault. No direct confrontation. The victims were selected almost as if they represented symbols rather than individuals. That realization complicated profiling efforts. Traditional motives offered little guidance. Jealousy. Revenge. Financial gain. None seemed applicable. The killer appeared motivated by something else entirely. Something internal. Something deeply personal. But what? That question haunted the investigation. The answer seemed hidden somewhere inside the offender's mind. Then another development changed everything. The letters. When investigators first examined the messages attributed to the killer, they immediately recognized their significance. This was no longer merely a shooting investigation. Now there was communication. The offender wanted interaction. He wanted attention. He wanted influence. The letters became evidence unlike any bullet or fingerprint. They offered a glimpse into personality. Not necessarily truth, but personality. The language was strange. Mocking. Arrogant. At times bizarre. The writer appeared eager to create an identity larger than the crimes themselves. Psychological experts reviewed every sentence. Every phrase. Every unusual word choice. Analysts searched for clues regarding education, background, and mental state. The letters generated theories. Perhaps the writer suffered from severe mental illness. Perhaps he was deliberately exaggerating instability. Perhaps both were true. No one could be certain. What investigators did know was that the letters transformed public awareness. The killer now possessed a voice. And that voice increased fear. As newspapers published portions of the messages, citizens became fascinated, terrified, obsessed. The mystery grew larger. The crime scenes became more than locations. They became chapters in an unfolding narrative. The city watched anxiously for what might happen next. Inside police headquarters, maps expanded. Colored pins marked attack sites. Strings connected locations. Patterns were examined repeatedly. Why these neighborhoods? Why these victims? Why these dates? Detectives hoped geography might reveal something. Serial offenders often operate within familiar territories. People commit crimes in places they know. Could the locations reveal where the killer lived? Where he worked? Where he felt comfortable? The theory seemed promising. Yet New York was enormous. The possible search area remained vast. Every answer created new questions. Then came the murder of Virginia Voskorichin. The crime scene immediately disturbed investigators. The attack differed slightly from previous incidents. Virginia had been walking alone. The setting had changed. The killer appeared more confident, more adaptable, potentially more dangerous. If victim selection was expanding, predicting future attacks became even harder. The city felt increasingly vulnerable. For many residents, fear became routine. Women altered hairstyles. Couples changed habits. Parents worried constantly. Ordinary behaviors were adjusted to accommodate an invisible threat. The psychological impact extended far beyond the direct victims. The entire city was becoming a secondary crime scene. Then came July 31, 1977. The final attack. At the time, nobody knew it would be the last. Detectives responded to the shooting of Stacy Moskowitz and Robert Violanta with familiar dread. Another couple. Another parked vehicle. Another eruption of violence. Another devastated family. The scene initially appeared similar to previous attacks. Yet hidden within the chaos was a detail that would ultimately change everything. One witness mentioned seeing a police officer issuing parking tickets near the area shortly before the shooting. The information seemed insignificant. Parking violations occurred constantly in New York. Thousands were written every day. Most investigators initially focused on more dramatic evidence. Witness descriptions, ballistics, timelines. The parking ticket seemed trivial by comparison. Yet major investigations are often solved through small details rather than dramatic revelations. One detective later reviewed the information carefully. The observation refused to disappear. If a parking enforcement officer had written tickets near the scene shortly before the attack, perhaps records existed. Perhaps those records documented vehicles present in the area. Perhaps one of those vehicles belonged to the killer. The idea sounded almost absurd. After 13 months of murder, could the breakthrough really come from a parking violation? Still, investigators pursued the possibility. They located records, examined tickets, reviewed vehicle registrations. The process was tedious, time-consuming, far from glamorous. But detective work often consists of persistence rather than inspiration. Eventually, one vehicle attracted attention. A yellow Ford Galaxy. The car had received a parking ticket near the scene. Its registered owner lived in Yonkers. His name was David Berkowitz. At first glance, nothing made the name extraordinary. Thousands of names had already crossed investigators' desks. One more meant little. Yet as detectives examined Berkowitz more closely, details began aligning. His physical appearance resembled certain witness descriptions. His residence fit geographic patterns. His age matched investigative expectations. The possibility emerged cautiously. Then grew stronger. Surveillance began. Investigators watched. Waited. Observed. For the first time in over a year, the investigation felt different. Not solved. But focused. The uncertainty that had dominated the case started narrowing. Detectives studied Berkowitz's movements. Examined his background. Searched for connections. What they discovered increased suspicion. Firearms experience. Behavioral oddities. Potential links to evidence. The pieces were beginning to fit. Not perfectly, but convincingly. The breakthrough had not come from a dramatic confession. It had not emerged from a spectacular chase. It had not arrived through forensic technology. Instead, it came from careful observation. A witness remembering something ordinary. An investigator refusing to dismiss it. A parking ticket sitting quietly in a file. One small detail. One overlooked record. One thread that, when pulled carefully, began unraveling the entire mystery. The discovery marked the beginning of the end. For 13 months, the killer had controlled the narrative. He chose when to strike. He chose where to strike. He chose how the city reacted. Now, for the first time, investigators were taking control back. The ghost haunting New York was becoming a man. The mystery was becoming an identity. The legend known as Son of Sam was beginning to collapse under the weight of reality. And in Yonkers, David Berkowitz had no idea that the walls were rapidly closing around him. The investigation that once seemed hopeless had finally found a path forward. The next step would not be another crime scene. It would be a doorstep. A surveillance operation. An arrest. And the moment one of the most infamous manhunts in New York history finally reached its conclusion. Part 6, The Investigation. By the middle of 1977, the hunt for the man, who would become known as Son of Sam, had evolved into one of the largest and most frustrating investigations in the history of New York City. The fear gripping the public was now matched by the pressure weighing on detectives. Every attack created headlines. Every headline created outrage. And every day without an arrest damaged public confidence. The killer seemed untouchable. He appeared without warning. Killed without hesitation. Disappeared without a trace. To many New Yorkers, he had become something more than a criminal. He had become a ghost. The challenge facing investigators was enormous. New York City was home to millions of people. Thousands matched portions of witness descriptions. Hundreds owned firearms. Dozens appeared suspicious enough to warrant investigation. Some leads seemed promising. Others sounded absurd. Yet every possibility had to be examined. Because somewhere among thousands of names was the man responsible. The task force assigned to the case grew steadily. Detectives from different boroughs worked together. Information flowed between departments. Ballistics experts analyzed evidence. Behavioral specialists examined patterns. Supervisors demanded progress. The pressure never stopped. Inside police headquarters, Walls became covered with photographs. Victim photographs. Crime scene photographs. Maps. Timelines. Witness sketches. Reports stacked across desks in growing piles. Investigators spent countless hours reviewing material that often led nowhere. Every detail mattered. Every possibility had to be tested. The killer had left very little physical evidence behind. That reality forced detectives to rely heavily on witness testimony. Unfortunately, witness testimony often created more confusion than clarity. One witness described a tall suspect. Another remembered someone shorter. Hair color varied. Facial features changed. Age estimates fluctuated dramatically. Some descriptions sounded as if they referred to completely different people. This inconsistency was not unusual. Human memory under stress is unreliable. When violence erupts unexpectedly, the brain focuses on survival rather than observation. Witnesses remember fragments, moments, impressions. Rarely do they remember perfect details. Yet detectives still had to work with what they had. Sketch artists transformed descriptions into composite drawings. The resulting images circulated throughout the city. Citizens studied them closely. Some believed they recognized neighbors. Others reported co-workers. The police received thousands of calls. Every caller seemed convinced they possessed the crucial clue. Most did not. The investigation became buried beneath information. Sorting useful leads from useless ones consumed enormous resources. One day a suspect appeared promising. The next day an alibi eliminated him. Again and again, detectives believed they were getting closer, only to discover they had followed another dead end. The emotional toll became significant. Many investigators carried the case home with them. They thought about it during meals. They dreamed about it at night. The victims' faces remained in their minds. Every failure felt personal. Because while police pursued false leads, the killer remained free. And everyone knew another attack could occur at any moment. As the investigation expanded, detectives began focusing on behavioral analysis. The crimes themselves revealed certain characteristics. The killer preferred surprise. He attacked quickly. He avoided lengthy interaction. He selected vulnerable targets. Most importantly, he appeared to derive satisfaction from fear itself. This observation became increasingly important after the letters emerged. The letters changed everything. Until then, investigators had been hunting a silent predator. Now the predator was speaking. The first major letter attracted immediate attention. Its tone was unsettling. Mocking. Arrogant. The writer seemed delighted by the confusion surrounding the investigation. He referred to himself in strange ways. He hinted at fantasies and obsessions. Most disturbing of all, he appeared proud of the suffering he had caused. Detectives analyzed every sentence, every punctuation mark, every unusual phrase. Handwriting experts examined the text. Psychologists reviewed the content. Linguistic specialists searched for clues regarding education and background. The letter became one of the most important pieces of evidence in the entire case. Not because it identified the killer directly, but because it revealed aspects of his personality. The writer desperately wanted attention. That fact carried enormous significance. Many serial offenders seek power. Some seek gratification. Others seek notoriety. The Son of Sam letter suggested a man obsessed with recognition. The murders alone were not enough. He wanted the public to know he existed. He wanted to control the conversation. He wanted New York to fear him. And judging by the public reaction, he was succeeding. The media quickly amplified the situation. Newspapers competed aggressively for new developments. Television reports featured extensive coverage. Radio hosts discussed theories daily. The killer's chosen nickname spread throughout the country. Son of Sam. The words sounded strange. Almost theatrical. Yet they became unforgettable. The name transformed an unknown murderer into a public figure. For investigators, this development was both helpful and dangerous. The publicity generated tips. But it also fed the killer's ego. Each newspaper article rewarded him. Each headline increased his sense of importance. Detectives worried the attention might encourage additional violence. Unfortunately, those concerns proved justified. As months passed, the attacks continued. The killer appeared emboldened. His confidence seemed to grow. Meanwhile, the public panic intensified. Women with long dark hair became particularly anxious due to rumors surrounding victim selection. Beauty salons reported unusual requests. Some women cut their hair dramatically shorter. Others changed hair color entirely. Parents imposed stricter curfews. Couples avoided secluded locations. Businesses noticed shifts in customer behavior. The killer was influencing daily life across New York. That level of psychological impact was rare. The city itself seemed to be changing. Detectives understood that solving the case required more than finding a suspect. They needed to understand how he thought. Why did he choose certain victims? Why those locations? Why those time periods? The answers remained frustratingly elusive. Then another letter appeared. And another. Each communication deepened the mystery. The writer described himself using bizarre language. At times he appeared delusional. At other times strangely calculating. Investigators debated what the letters actually revealed. Was the killer genuinely mentally ill? Was he exaggerating symptoms to confuse police? Was he constructing a fictional persona? The uncertainty complicated profiling efforts. One expert argued that the writer suffered from severe psychological disturbances. Another suggested deliberate manipulation. Both interpretations contained elements of truth. What nobody knew at the time was that David Berkowitz enjoyed creating confusion. The uncertainty surrounding his motives provided him with a sense of power. The less people understood him, the more attention he received. While analysts debated psychology, detectives continued pursuing traditional police work. They interviewed witnesses repeatedly. Reviewed evidence again and again. Compared reports. Tracked suspects. Executed search warrants. Conducted surveillance operations. Many investigations fail because detectives stop looking. This one succeeded because they refused to quit. Still, progress remained painfully slow. Months passed without major breakthroughs. The public grew impatient. Criticism increased. Some newspapers openly questioned police competence. Political leaders demanded results. The pressure became relentless. For investigators, every morning began with the same question. What are we missing? Somewhere within thousands of reports and witness statements existed the answer. They simply had not found it yet. The breakthrough would not arrive through dramatic genius. It would emerge through persistence, careful attention, and a willingness to examine even the smallest details. The final attack against Stacy Moskowitz and Robert Violante intensified everything. The crime scene felt familiar. Too familiar. Another young couple. Another burst of gunfire. Another devastated family. But this time, detectives sensed the investigation was approaching a turning point. Not because they possessed new evidence. Not because they knew the suspect. But because the pressure had become unsustainable. The killer was active. The public was terrified. Resources were fully committed. Something had to change. Then came the witness observation. A parking ticket. A routine administrative detail that might easily have been ignored. Many detectives would have dismissed it. Some initially did. After all, parking tickets seemed insignificant compared to murder. Yet major cases often turn on minor details. One investigator followed the lead. Then another. Records were examined. Vehicle registrations reviewed. Information compared. The process was slow. Methodical. Unremarkable. Yet it produced results. One vehicle stood out. A yellow Ford Galaxy. Registered to a man named David Berkowitz. At first, the discovery seemed modest. Just another name. Another possible lead. But as detectives looked closer, their interest intensified. Berkowitz fit certain witness descriptions. His location aligned with investigative theories. Additional details raised suspicion. The possibility became difficult to ignore. Surveillance teams were assigned. Detectives began watching him. Every movement mattered. Every observation was documented. For the first time in months, investigators felt genuine momentum. The case no longer seemed endless. The mystery no longer felt impossible. There was finally a direction. A focus. A target. Yet caution remained essential. Detectives understood the danger of becoming emotionally attached to a suspect. Evidence had to guide decisions. Not hope. Not desperation. They continued gathering information. Piece by piece. Observation by observation. The picture slowly sharpened. And as it sharpened, the truth became increasingly difficult to deny. The man they had spent 13 months searching for might finally be within reach. The investigation that had consumed countless hours, exhausted hundreds of officers, and terrified millions of citizens was approaching its final stage. The ghost haunting New York was beginning to take human form. Soon, detectives would stop searching through reports. Soon, they would stop analyzing theories. Soon, they would stop chasing possibilities. Instead, they would confront a single man. A quiet man living in Yonkers. A man who appeared ordinary. A man whose name meant nothing to the public. But a man who was about to become one of the most infamous criminals in American history. The investigation was no longer about finding a suspect. It was about proving what investigators were beginning to suspect. And if they were right, the nightmare that had gripped New York for 13 terrifying months was finally nearing its end. Part 7, The Breakthrough. For 13 months, the investigation had felt like a chase through fog. Every clue seemed incomplete. Every promising lead eventually collapsed. Every attack reminded detectives that the man they were hunting remained one step ahead. The killer had become a symbol of frustration. He was everywhere and nowhere. Known by millions. Identified by no one. But in the first days of August 1977, something finally changed. The breakthrough did not arrive through advanced forensic science. It did not emerge from a dramatic confession. It did not come from an undercover operation, or a lucky eyewitness suddenly recognizing the suspect. Instead, it began with something almost embarrassingly ordinary. A parking ticket. The kind of detail most people would never remember. The kind of detail that usually disappears into filing cabinets and administrative records. Yet history often turns on the smallest observations. In the aftermath of the July 31, 1977 shooting that killed Stacy Moskowitz and severely injured Robert Violanta, detectives once again flooded the crime scene. The atmosphere felt familiar. Too familiar. Yellow police tape stretched across the area. Flashbulbs illuminated the darkness. Witnesses gathered. Reporters searched for information. Investigators documented every possible detail. The city was horrified. Again. But among the many witness interviews conducted after the attack, one observation stood out. A local woman recalled seeing a police officer issuing parking tickets near the area shortly before the shooting. At first glance, the information seemed insignificant. Parking enforcement occurred constantly throughout New York. Thousands of tickets were written every week. Most had nothing to do with violent crime. Still, experienced detectives understood an important principle. Sometimes the smallest facts become the most valuable. A witness might forget a face. A witness might misjudge height or age. But routine events often remain surprisingly memorable. The woman insisted she remembered the ticketing activity. That memory lingered in investigators' minds. What if one of those ticketed vehicles belonged to the killer? What if the offender had parked near the scene before carrying out the attack? The theory sounded simple. Perhaps too simple. Yet after 13 months of frustration, detectives could not afford to ignore any possibility. Investigators began reviewing parking records from the area. The process was slow and tedious. No dramatic revelations occurred. No flashing signs pointed toward the answer. Instead, officers examined paperwork. Names. Addresses. Registration numbers. Line after line. Record after record. The work resembled accounting more than detective fiction. But real investigations often unfold that way. Hours of boring work occasionally produce moments of extraordinary significance. Then one name appeared. David Berkowitz. His yellow Ford Galaxy had received a parking ticket near the scene. At first, the discovery meant very little. Thousands of vehicle owners lived throughout New York and its surrounding communities. A name on a parking ticket did not make someone a serial killer. Yet investigators understood the importance of context. The question was not whether Berkowitz had received a parking ticket. The question was whether everything else about him fit the pattern. The answer became increasingly disturbing. As detectives examined Berkowitz's background, small pieces began falling into place. His age aligned with witness estimates. His appearance shared similarities with several descriptions collected over the course of the investigation. His location made sense geographically. He lived in Yonkers, a position that allowed convenient access to various attack sites. None of these factors alone proved anything. Together, they created suspicion. The investigation suddenly had direction. For the first time in months, detectives were no longer drowning in possibilities. They had a specific individual to examine. Surveillance operations began quietly. Investigators watched Berkowitz carefully. Every movement mattered. Every observation was recorded. The atmosphere inside the task force changed. Hope returned. Cautious hope. Nobody wanted to celebrate prematurely. Too many promising leads had failed before. But something felt different this time. As detectives learned more about Berkowitz, the similarities became harder to dismiss. His background contained troubling details. His behavior raised questions. The evidence, while still incomplete, seemed to point toward him with increasing consistency. Meanwhile, Berkowitz remained unaware of how close investigators had come. For over a year, he had operated in relative safety. He had fired his weapon and disappeared. Sent letters and remained anonymous. Watched headlines while avoiding capture. The sense of invulnerability that often develops in serial offenders may have begun affecting his judgment. Success can create overconfidence. Overconfidence creates mistakes. The parking ticket represented exactly that kind of mistake. A minor oversight. A seemingly meaningless detail. Yet it had brought detectives directly to his doorstep. As surveillance continued, investigators worked carefully. They needed more than suspicion. They needed evidence. They needed confirmation. The stakes were enormous. The entire city expected answers. If Berkowitz truly was the son of Sam Killer, one wrong move could allow him to escape. Detectives proceeded with patience. Every decision mattered. Every observation contributed to the growing picture. Then another important development emerged. Investigators connected Berkowitz to the type of weapon used in the attacks. Additional information strengthened the case. The evidence was still developing, but the pattern was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. Inside police headquarters, conversations shifted. For months, discussions had focused on theories. Now they focused on strategy. How should they approach him? When should they move? What risks remained? Veteran detectives understood that arrests often represent the most dangerous moment of an investigation. Suspects can flee, destroy evidence, resist violently. Every possibility had to be considered. The son of Sam case carried additional complications. The suspect had demonstrated a willingness to kill repeatedly. No one could predict how he might react when confronted. Plans were developed carefully. Surveillance intensified. Officers monitored his apartment, watched his vehicle, tracked his movements. The circle tightened. Day by day. Hour by hour. The manhunt that had consumed New York was reaching its conclusion. Yet even at this stage, uncertainty remained. Investigators believed they had their suspect. Belief was not enough. They needed certainty. Then came August 10, 1977. The day everything changed. The summer air hung heavy over Yonkers. Residents moved through ordinary routines. Children played. Workers traveled to jobs. Neighbors carried groceries. Few realized history was unfolding nearby. Police officers positioned themselves near Berkowitz's apartment building. The operation proceeded quietly. No dramatic announcements. No television cameras. No public spectacle. Just experienced investigators waiting patiently. Eventually, Berkowitz approached his vehicle. Detectives watched closely. This was the moment. The culmination of 13 months of fear, frustration, and relentless effort. Officers moved in. The confrontation itself proved surprisingly calm. After all the violence. After all the panic. After all the headlines. The end arrived with remarkable simplicity. David Berkowitz did not engage in a dramatic shootout. He did not attempt a desperate escape. He did not transform into the larger-than-life monster imagined by the public. Instead, investigators encountered a man sitting inside his car. A man who suddenly realized the hunt was over. Accounts from the arrest describe a moment that has since become legendary. According to police, Berkowitz looked at the officers and acknowledged the obvious. "You got me." 3 simple words. 3 words that effectively ended one of the most notorious manhunts in American history. For detectives, the moment brought relief. But also disbelief. After months of searching, they had finally reached the finish line. The ghost haunting New York was real. And he was sitting directly in front of them. The search of Berkowitz's vehicle produced exactly the kind of discoveries investigators had hoped for. Weapons, ammunition, maps, items linking him to the crimes. Each piece of evidence strengthened the case. Each discovery reinforced the growing certainty that the nightmare was ending. News of the arrest spread rapidly. Reporters scrambled for information. Television stations interrupted programming. Newspapers rushed to prepare special editions. Across New York City, residents reacted with shock. Many had spent more than a year living with fear. Now they finally had a face. A name. An explanation. Or at least part of one. For some, relief arrived immediately. For others, questions remained. Who was David Berkowitz? Why had he done it? How could an apparently ordinary man become the source of so much suffering? Those questions would dominate the next phase of the case. Because capturing a killer does not automatically explain him. The arrest solved the mystery of identity. It did not solve the mystery of motive. That mystery would become even stranger in the days ahead. Within 24 hours, Berkowitz began talking. And what he said would leave investigators, journalists, psychologists, and the public stunned. The man who had terrorized New York was finally speaking openly. But the story he told was unlike anything anyone expected. The breakthrough had identified the killer. Now the world was about to hear from him directly. And the bizarre explanations that followed would ensure that the Son of Sam case remained infamous long after the shooting stopped. Part 8, Justice. The arrest of David Berkowitz ended the shootings. It did not end the questions. For more than a year, New York City had lived beneath a shadow. Parents worried whenever their children left home after dark. Young couples glanced nervously over their shoulders. Women altered hairstyles, because rumors suggested a killer preferred certain victims. The city had become trapped in a cycle of fear, speculation, and grief. Now the man responsible sat in police custody. The nightmare finally had a face. Yet for investigators, the conclusion of the manhunt marked the beginning of a different challenge. They needed answers. Not only for themselves. For the victims. For the families. For an entire city that had spent 13 months wondering why. Inside the interrogation room, David Berkowitz appeared remarkably calm. That calmness unsettled many investigators. They expected resistance. Denial. Perhaps anger. Instead, they encountered a man who seemed strangely relieved. The exhausting game of cat and mouse was over. The secrecy. The hiding. The constant risk of capture. All of it had ended. Within a short period of time, Berkowitz began confessing. The admissions came with surprising ease. Case after case. Victim after victim. Crime scene after crime scene. Investigators listened carefully as he described details that only the killer could know. Locations. Actions. Timelines. Information that confirmed what detectives had suspected. The man sitting before them was indeed the individual responsible for the Son of Sam attacks. For many officers, the moment felt surreal. They had spent countless hours chasing an invisible predator. Now he was talking openly. Almost casually. As if discussing events from someone else's life. Yet the confessions also introduced a new mystery. The explanation Berkowitz offered sounded bizarre. According to his account, a demon had ordered him to kill. The source of these instructions, he claimed, came through a neighbor's dog. A black Labrador belonging to a man named Sam Carr. Berkowitz insisted the animal was possessed. He claimed it communicated supernatural commands. Commands that eventually led to murder. The story immediately attracted enormous attention. Newspapers printed details. Television programs discussed the claims endlessly. The public became fascinated. Was the killer insane? Was he telling the truth about what he believed? Or was he creating a fantasy designed to shock people even further? Psychologists debated the issue. Investigators remained skeptical. Many believed the story served a practical purpose. If Berkowitz appeared mentally unstable, perhaps people would focus on demons rather than personal responsibility. Perhaps the mythology would become more memorable than the reality. And perhaps that was exactly what he wanted. Attention had always seemed important to him. The letters demonstrated that. The nickname demonstrated that. The elaborate explanations might simply represent another attempt to control the narrative. Whatever the truth, the confession removed any doubt regarding his involvement. The evidence already pointed strongly toward him. Now his own words completed the picture. The district attorney's office moved quickly. The legal process could finally begin. For the families of the victims, the approaching court proceedings carried complicated emotions. Relief mixed with grief. Satisfaction mixed with anger. The arrest had answered one question. Who committed the crimes? But another reality remained unchanged. The people they had lost were not coming back. No courtroom could reverse that fact. No sentence could restore stolen futures. Parents still faced empty bedrooms. Friends still carried memories. Survivors still lived with physical and emotional scars. Justice could punish the offender. It could not erase the damage. As preparations for trial continued, public interest intensified. Every development generated headlines. Reporters crowded outside courthouses. Television crews documented every appearance. The Son of Sam case had already become one of the most famous criminal investigations in American history. Now the judicial process attracted equal attention. People wanted to see the man who had terrified New York. They wanted to understand him. Many discovered something unsettling. David Berkowitz did not look like a monster. He looked ordinary. Average height. Average build. An unremarkable face. The contrast disturbed observers. Human beings often expect evil to announce itself visually. We imagine killers appearing sinister. Different. Recognizable. Reality rarely works that way. The most frightening criminals often blend into everyday life. They look like neighbors. Co-workers. People standing quietly in line at grocery stores. Berkowitz embodied that uncomfortable truth. Nothing about his appearance explained the suffering he had caused. Nothing about his face revealed the violence hidden behind it. As legal proceedings moved forward, questions regarding his mental state became increasingly important. Defense attorneys explored psychiatric issues. Mental health experts conducted evaluations. The court needed to determine whether Berkowitz understood the nature of his actions. The distinction mattered enormously. Criminal responsibility depends on comprehension. Could he distinguish right from wrong? Did he understand what he was doing? Or had severe mental illness prevented rational judgment? Experts examined these questions extensively. The conclusions proved significant. Although Berkowitz displayed psychological problems and disturbing beliefs, evaluators generally concluded that he understood his actions. He knew what he was doing. He understood the consequences. He recognized the difference between lawful and unlawful behavior. That assessment helped shape the legal outcome. The possibility of an insanity defense faded. Meanwhile, public fascination continued growing. The case dominated conversations across the country. Some people focused on the investigation. Others focused on psychology. Many remained captivated by the strange references to demons and possession. The story seemed almost too bizarre to be real. Yet beneath the sensational details remained a simple fact. Real people had died. Real families had suffered. The legal process needed to address that reality. In May 1978, the courtroom became the stage for one of the most anticipated moments in the entire case. Victims' families sat among spectators. Reporters filled available space. Attorneys prepared arguments. The atmosphere felt heavy with expectation. Then something unexpected happened. Rather than forcing prosecutors through a lengthy trial, Berkowitz chose to plead guilty. The decision surprised some observers. Others believed it reflected the overwhelming evidence against him. Whatever the motivation, the guilty plea eliminated uncertainty. There would be no dramatic courtroom battle over identity. No extended debate regarding whether he committed the crimes. The admissions were direct, clear, unequivocal. For the families, hearing those words carried immense emotional weight. The man responsible was finally accepting responsibility. Not because he suddenly felt remorse. Not necessarily because he wanted forgiveness. But because the facts left little room for denial. One by one, the murders were acknowledged. One by one, the victims were recognized. The legal system moved toward its conclusion. Yet even during these proceedings, Berkowitz's behavior sometimes appeared unusual. Observers noted moments that seemed detached from the gravity of the situation. At times he smiled. At times he appeared oddly relaxed. Such behavior angered many family members. They saw profound suffering. He appeared disconnected from it. The contrast deepened their pain. Sentencing eventually arrived. The courtroom grew silent. Years of fear. Months of investigation. Countless hours of legal preparation. All leading to this moment. The judge addressed the crimes with appropriate seriousness. The murders had devastated families. Terrorized communities. Consumed enormous public resources. The consequences demanded severe punishment. When the sentence was announced, it reflected the scale of the devastation. Multiple consecutive life sentences. A punishment ensuring that Berkowitz would spend the foreseeable future behind bars. For many New Yorkers, the announcement provided a sense of closure. Not complete closure. Such a thing rarely exists in murder cases. But a measure of it. The killer would not walk free. The threat was gone. The city could begin healing. Outside the courthouse, reactions varied. Some family members expressed relief. Others felt only sadness. Many experienced both simultaneously. Justice had been delivered. Yet justice could never equal restoration. No sentence could recreate lost birthdays. No prison term could restore shattered relationships. The legal system had done what it could. The emotional wounds would remain. As Berkowitz entered the correctional system, public attention gradually shifted elsewhere. New crimes emerged. New headlines appeared. New fears occupied the nation. But the Son of Sam case refused to disappear entirely. Its impact had been too profound. The investigation changed policing strategies. The media coverage influenced future criminal cases. The public fascination with serial offenders grew stronger. Most importantly, the victims remained part of New York's collective memory. The judicial process had reached its conclusion. The manhunt was over. The verdict was delivered. The sentence imposed. Yet the story itself was not finished. Because some crimes continue affecting society long after the courtroom empties. The Son of Sam murders had altered the city. They had altered the families involved. And in many ways, they had altered the national conversation about crime, fear, and media attention. The law had spoken. Justice had been served as completely as the system could provide. But the deeper consequences of the case were only beginning to reveal themselves. The aftermath would extend far beyond prison walls. And the legacy of Son of Sam would continue for decades to come. Part 9, The Aftermath. When the courtroom doors finally closed and David Berkowitz disappeared into the prison system, many New Yorkers expected something simple to happen. They expected the fear to end. For 13 months, the city had lived beneath the shadow of an invisible gunman. Every attack had created fresh anxiety. Every newspaper headline had reminded residents that a killer remained free. Every siren in the distance had carried new meaning. Now the man responsible was locked away. The nightmare was over. At least, that was what people hoped. But the aftermath of a crime this large rarely follows a clean ending. The shooting stopped. The damage remained. Across New York City, life gradually returned to normal. Couples once again parked their cars without constantly scanning the darkness. Young women stopped altering their appearances because of rumors surrounding the killer's preferences. Parents became less fearful whenever their children left home after sunset. The city breathed easier. Yet beneath that relief lingered something more complicated. Memory. Fear may fade quickly. Memory does not. The Son of Sam case had carved itself into the collective consciousness of New York. People remembered exactly where they were when they heard about certain attacks. They remembered reading newspaper headlines over breakfast. They remembered conversations in offices and restaurants. They remembered locking doors more carefully than before. An entire generation carried those memories. For the families of the victims, however, the aftermath looked very different. While the city celebrated the arrest, they continued navigating grief. The public often views criminal cases through a specific timeline. The crime occurs. The investigation follows. The killer is captured. Justice is served. The story ends. For families, there is no such ending. Life continues. Birthdays arrive. Holidays return. Years pass. And every milestone reminds them of who is missing. For the parents of Donna Lauria, the arrest could not restore their daughter. For the loved ones of Christine Freund, it could not create the wedding that never happened. For the family of Virginia Voskerichen, it could not return the young woman whose future had been stolen. For the people who loved Stacy Moskowitz, no courtroom victory could erase the loss. The public celebrated resolution. The families continued mourning. That difference is important. True crime often focuses on endings. Real grief rarely has one. The survivors faced their own struggles. Robert Violante carried permanent damage to his eyesight. Joanne Lomino faced a lifetime of physical challenges after suffering devastating injuries. Others carried invisible wounds, anxiety, nightmares, hypervigilance, the lingering effects of trauma. Recovery became a journey measured not in weeks or months, but in years. Sometimes decades. Many survivors of violent crime describe a feeling that part of their lives becomes permanently divided. There is the person they were before, and the person they became afterward. The Son of Sam attacks created those divisions for numerous people. The consequences extended far beyond those directly injured. Police officers involved in the investigation also carried lasting memories. Many detectives spent more than a year immersed in the case. They studied photographs, visited crime scenes, interviewed grieving families, worked exhausting hours. The arrest brought relief, but it did not erase what they had witnessed. Law enforcement professionals often develop emotional attachments to major cases. Not because they want to, because they are human. The faces of victims remain. The sounds of grieving relatives remain. The frustration of dead ends remains. For many investigators, the Son of Sam case became one of the defining experiences of their careers. It demonstrated both the strengths and limitations of police work. Persistence eventually solved the mystery. Yet numerous opportunities had been missed along the way. The investigation became a subject of study within law enforcement circles. What worked? What failed? How could future investigations improve? Those questions remained relevant long after Berkowitz entered prison. Meanwhile, the media continued examining every aspect of the case. Books appeared. Magazine features followed. Television programs revisited the story. Public fascination remained intense. People wanted explanations. Why had Berkowitz killed strangers? What motivated him? How much of his story about demons and possessed dogs was genuine? How much was fabrication? The answers proved elusive. Over time, many psychologists and investigators reached similar conclusions. The supernatural explanations seemed less convincing than the psychological ones. Berkowitz appeared to have constructed a mythology around himself. A mythology that attracted attention. A mythology that transformed an ordinary man into something larger. Perhaps that had always been part of the goal. Attention had played a role throughout the crimes. The letters demonstrated that. The taunts demonstrated that. The creation of the Son of Sam identity demonstrated that. The murders alone generated fear. The stories generated fame. And fame carried power. The case became one of the earliest modern examples of what some experts later described as a media-driven serial killer phenomenon. The public learned the killer's nickname. The newspapers published his words. Television discussed his actions constantly. The attention became part of the story itself. That realization sparked broader conversations throughout the United States. Should the media provide extensive coverage to violent offenders? Does publicity encourage future criminals? Can attention become a reward? These debates continue today. And many of them trace part of their history back to the Son of Sam case. The impact extended into the legal world as well. In the years following Berkowitz's conviction, lawmakers confronted a troubling question. Should criminals profit from their notoriety? Publishers occasionally offered money for interviews. Film producers expressed interest in dramatic adaptations. The possibility that offenders could earn income from their crimes angered many victims' families. As a result, legislation emerged that became known as Son of Sam laws. The purpose was straightforward: prevent criminals from financially benefiting from the publicity generated by their offenses. The legal details evolved over time and faced constitutional challenges, but the broader principle reflected public outrage. Many people believed that victims deserved consideration before offenders received financial opportunities. The very existence of such laws demonstrated the case's cultural impact. Few criminal investigations influence legislation. The Son of Sam case did. Inside prison, David Berkowitz gradually changed. At least outwardly. Years passed. The intense media attention faded. The man once occupying front pages became another inmate serving a lengthy sentence. Reports described shifts in his behavior. He claimed to have found religion. He expressed remorse. He spoke differently about his crimes than he had during the original investigation. Some observers accepted these changes. Others remained skeptical. The debate continues. Can someone responsible for such violence genuinely transform? Can remorse undo unimaginable harm? There are no easy answers. For many victims' families, those questions matter less than public discussions sometimes assume. Whether Berkowitz changed or not, the consequences remained the same. The dead remained dead. The injuries remained permanent. The losses remained irreversible. Time moved forward. The damage endured. As decades passed, New York itself changed dramatically. Crime rates eventually declined. Neighborhoods transformed. New generations grew up knowing the Son of Sam case only through books and documentaries. Yet the story never disappeared entirely. It remained part of the city's history. A reminder of a period when fear seemed to spread faster than facts. A reminder of how vulnerable even a massive city can feel when confronted by random violence. Perhaps most importantly, the case challenged assumptions about evil. Many people prefer simple explanations. They want monsters to look monstrous. They want danger to appear obvious. The Son of Sam case offered a different lesson. David Berkowitz did not resemble a fictional villain. He lived among ordinary people. Worked ordinary jobs. Blended into ordinary surroundings. The contrast between appearance and reality disturbed the public then. It continues to disturb people now. Because it forces an uncomfortable truth. Some of the most dangerous individuals do not stand apart from society. They hide within it. As the years accumulated, the legacy of the case became increasingly complex. It was a story about murder. A story about fear. A story about media influence. A story about criminal psychology. A story about investigative persistence. But beneath all those themes remained something simpler. Human loss. The names most people remember are often those of killers. History has a tendency to preserve notoriety. Yet the true legacy of the Son of Sam case belongs elsewhere. It belongs to Donna Lauria, Christine Freund, Virginia Voskerichen, Stacy Moskowitz, and the survivors whose lives were permanently altered. Their stories represented the real cost of the crimes. Not newspaper circulation. Not television ratings. Not criminal fame. Human lives. Human futures. Human dreams interrupted forever. As the city slowly healed and the years carried New York into a different era, one truth remained unchanged. The Son of Sam investigation had ended. The consequences had not. And even decades later, the echoes of those 13 terrifying months could still be heard in the memories of those who lived through them, a reminder that some crimes continue casting shadows long after the gunfire stops.